Good evening, everybody. Hello, and Happy New Year to you all. Nice to see so many people here, bright and ready for the next council year. Sorry, also it's so early in January, a bit cruel, but never mind. We had so much to go through in Housing, Neighbourhoods and Leisure because there's so many good things happening. We had to put in an extra meeting, which can only be a good thing. So we have quite a full agenda today. We also have an amendment. So we do have an updated Reading's domestic abuse and safe accommodation strategy. Everyone here has the new papers. What it does mean, though, online is that the online page numbering doesn't match what we have here. But if you go online, the agenda will take you to the appropriate page, so you don't need to particularly have the page numbers anyway. But that's in case anyone is watching. We refer to a specific page after this strategy, the numbers won't match. If there is anyone watching, hello, unlikely. OK, so first off then, let's get on with declarations of interest. Councillor Mpufu-Coles, did you have a declaration of interest?
Thank you, Chair. A declaration of interest on items about HAS, University of Reading. Thank you.
OK, so that's item 10. Yes, excellent, thank you. Anybody else? No, okie dokes. Then on to minutes of the last meeting. Is everyone happy they are accurate so I can get them signed? Yeah. Okay. Okay, that's that. We have no decision book references, so we move on to agenda item 4, which is the household waste update on phase 2 food waste collection service for high and low rise flats. That will be introduced by Councillor Rowland. Oh, Andy, okay, Andy Edwards, you start then.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the phase 2 rollout of the food waste collection service to the 14,000 high and low-rise flats, following the earlier completion of the main phase 1 rollout to the 56,000 residential properties in Reading. It was acknowledged right from the start of this project that the flatty properties would require a greater level of support to implement and adapt to the changes in waste collections that we've introduced, as each block can have its own unique challenges. To date, since June 2022, we have rolled out the new service to 42 blocks of flats, which is a slight update from what's contained within the report. 42 blocks, sorry, and that contains 950 flats. We do that on a week-by-week basis, introducing it to a new block each week, other than we except for a break of 1 month either side of Christmas, where obviously we stopped during that period of time. The rollout was always designed to be at a measured pace to ensure that the waste collection team had got sufficient capacity for both introducing this phase 2 rollout and also to continue to deliver all the other waste collections that we already undertake across the borough. Before we introduce food waste collections to the flats, officers go out, the recycling and enforcement team, to assess the capacity required for the food waste, recycling and general waste for each block, to make sure that's correct and of the sufficient capacity, and also that the correct supporting signage is in place. The residents in each block are notified at least 2 weeks in advance of the rollout with an information guide, an indoor caddy and a roll of caddy liners to help them to be prepared for the change. There's also a wealth of information available on the website as well to support this rollout. As well as this, our recycling enforcement team also go out knocking on doors to engage with the residents to answer any questions that they may have, and also, really importantly, to deal with any barriers to participation that individual residents may have. This may include language barriers. So, for example, we've got different leaflets in different languages, Nepalese, Polish and Romanian are 3 that just spring to mind straight off. This engagement, both prior and during the early weeks of the rollout, is really important, particularly in the flatty properties, to aid the success of the rollout. We also engage before the rollout with the managing agents, so the managing agents, whether that's our own Reading Council's housing client or the managing agent for the private blocks, are also fully engaged in advance, so that they are aware of what's required in terms of bin capacity and signage as well, and can also, in any newsletters they may give out or any correspondence or engagement with the tenants, discuss this as well. The The rollout to the flats, I'm pleased to say, is going well at the moment, and the team are constantly tweaking and improving the rollout as we gain more experience of managing food waste collection in the flats. So, like I say, that's just an ongoing process, and we're not rushing it. We're making sure that we do it properly as we roll it out. Also included in the report are some of the headline summary figures that we've been able to now determine since the phase 1 introduction of the food waste collection service to the 56,000 residential properties. These include the increase in the recycling rate from 34% to 50%, which really pleased that we've managed to sustain. We've got a greater yield per household of food waste than what was originally anticipated, and we're still about 2.5 kilograms per participating household. For part of our environmental initiatives, we're saving against historic operations about 4,700 tonnes per year of carbon through the new system that we're doing. And also, just the last point I want to raise is we've also managed to reduce the amount of food waste in our residents' grey waste bins, which is the residual waste bin, from 41% to 23%. We're basing that on the composition analysis of a sample of Reading households that we carry out each year. The service, however, isn't resting on its laurels and continues to work through the recycling enforcement team, the RE3 partnership and the communication team, and also through ward members on how we can continue to reduce that figure further. We've done really well by getting from 41 to 23% of food waste, but there's still 23% that we can marginally gain to improve our performance. So thank you, Chair, and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair, and I would like to thank Andy Edwards and his team for the work they've done. It is a collective job and effort with RE3 to ensure that we are continuing to progress with food waste collection and and really hit that 50% or above number in terms of recycling in our town, which I'm very, very proud that this has been able to do. That from the point in which we took this decision in policy to make these changes, we have boldly changed our picture in the amount that we recycle. So I'm very, very proud of that. I'd also like to acknowledge and give appreciation to officers for their systematic and very careful process in the way they're taking the rollout to the flats, because it is challenging. As a matter of fact, DEFRA has even acknowledged that and is offering assistance, financial assistance to those flats or to councils in reaching difficult to reach properties, which is something we'll be speaking to DEFRA about. So it's not always that easy. Also, really, something I'm very pro on is the increase of language opportunities, so that when we can increase our ability to put information out in other languages from someone that's moved from many different countries myself, that is very much appreciated, and it gives you a certain amount of knowledge. So I'm very pleased with those efforts. The enforcement team has worked very, very hard with residents, and I'm anticipating that going at the rate we're going, we will have a more successful program as a result. So that's very encouraging. The BIMfographic chart on page 12 of the report is very interesting, and it does show a collective sampling of how things are progressing. It also shows tremendous opportunity that we are working on through getting our food out of our gray bins, through getting that out, and through getting out other items in our gray bins that are still recycling that shouldn't be in there. So that presents a number of opportunities. The mix of the 2022 BIMfographic has been somewhat affected also by the cost of living crisis. So we're starting to see a different mix there, but we see real opportunities in the paper card tins and the wood metals and garden waste and electricals and all of that, where we can continue to find pockets where we can take that recycling out of that gray waste bin. So our enforcement team and our street care teams are all working on that. And I appreciate again and thank officers for the report, and I commend it to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In our household, it is very much how much food waste have we managed to avoid by eating it, basically, as well, rather than throwing it away, rather not throw any away, really. But it's really good news, this report. I have a comment from Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you, and I'd also like to thank you for the report. It was very well written and easy to digest as a non-specialist in your field. You mentioned going in and talking to people about barriers, and I had wondered as I read through it whether we had any picture yet of what those barriers were and if we had any ideas for tackling them. I realise that's more of a long-term sort of thing. Also, you said that when they're given the bins, they're given the rolls of bags ready to use. I've had some anecdotal evidence and personal experience of sort of going to try and replenish my supply and nowhere having them, you know, of sort of trying in the Meadway, trying over at the library, heading down to Caversham Library, trying at Rivermead on the way, and nobody having them. And I was just wondering, because obviously what's key to this is as we develop these habits in people, we want them to be able to sustain them and keep them going. And we don't want there to be any kind of additional excuses to not engage with the recycling. So I just was curious about how we're managing supply. It might be that I've just arrived on glitch occasions, but yeah, I mean, obviously we want that to be as smooth as is possible so that people keep recycling. My third point was sort of into the future, because what you're doing to inform the flats sounds brilliant. I mean, it sounds really comprehensive. You know, there seem to be no gaps in what you're reaching. How do we sustain that going forward after the rollout? Because my concern is, you know, people move out. In Reading, we have quite a high turnover of population. And how do we ensure that new people moving into the flats post rollout are going to get the same level of information? Do we have stashes of leaflets with landlords? Do we send it out when people go onto the electoral roll, but then not everyone does that? How are we going to sustain it in the long term? And thank you again for such a good report.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell, for those questions. I'll try and remember them in the right order. So the first question is what we've done all through the processes. Whenever we've had any questions that either throw up a new challenge or seem to be consistent themes, we provide a response form, and we also put them on the frequently asked questions on the website. So if the questions have consistently come up, like where do I get my liners from, what happens if my caddy gets damaged, all those sorts of questions, we make sure that information is all available on the website, and also the recycling enforcement team can help with that messaging as well. So that's how we're keeping a track on what the themes are and how we display that information. With regards to the caddy liners, we have had problems this last 12 months with supply issues. We had a time when we placed an order, they didn't arrive on time, so we ran perilously low and some sites did run out. We've now got a larger stock of those, but what we are having to do is to make sure that we're trying, wherever possible, to only give them out one roller liner per person, because some people were using them for other activities as well, which was causing that stocks to go down faster than usual. In terms of what do we do for new residents to inform this of it? Well, in certain areas like the university areas, our recycling enforcement team work alongside the university officers to make sure that it's included as part of the packs for any new residents there. We can do the same as well with our own Reading housing stock, where we can provide information with their welcoming packs. And also we have got a plethora of information available so that if anyone rings up and asks any question, we can get the recycling enforcement team to either drop them off or email the information to them. So that is an ongoing, and that's a really good question, because that is ongoing about, it's all right at this moment in time, but how do we make sure that's sustained going forward? So that's something that we are working towards. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Barnett Ward. For clarity, I've got you, and then I've got Councillor Singh, and then I've got Councillor Cresswell. That's the order I saw people.
No, sorry, I must have been imagining things. Yes, so actually, Andy, you're being very discreet there about the other uses for the bin liners. Because I remember from my days in that seat, a lot of people use them as dog poo bags, and that's how you run out. Yeah, you see them in the dog poo bins. So it is really difficult to make sure there's a level that there's stuff that's available to people legitimately, but to make sure that people don't go, oh, there's loads of these, I'm going to go and, I don't know, dress my children in food waste liners. Just to be really parochial, obviously I did used to be the lead member of this. I know how much work is involved in this and how great the team are. And I was the lead for the individual house properties rollout. Which did include HMOs and had some very challenging stuff, but it handed over at the point where the flats were going. But I saw some of the prep for flats, and I have a ward with a very high proportion of flatted developments, a lot of residents who are really, really keen to get this service. They see the good things that are happening as a result of it. They want to be part of those good things, but it is really important that we don't rush into it, because it has to be a bespoke service. It has to be tailored to each block, otherwise it won't work. It's so easy for the bin stores to get messy and contaminated, for people to not do it properly. So I think we have a role as councillors to make sure we're communicating that to residents who are saying, why haven't I got this service? So we're making sure that it works for you and for your block. Every block is different. So I just want to highlight that and commend that. And yes, to ask people to only take one roll at a time and don't use it for dog poo.
Excellent, thank you. I've got Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy, for producing this report. It's very detailed. My question is around the bin graphic point 5.5 on page 14. I want to understand how does this waste compositional analysis take place? Does it take place over a month or at one certain point of time, like a sample is taken? And how that comparison is made to 2019 and 2022? And second, did we see any increase in number of households in 2019? I see phase 2 we started in June 2022. So I believe the same percentage of households were using the bins, I believe, or was there an increase in number of residents in 2019 to 2022?
Thank you, Councillor Singh, for that question. So the first thing to say is that the 2019 binographic was before we introduced the change in the food waste service. So that was what Reading was like at that time. So that was pre the changeover. So that's the first part of it. The second part is that the latest graph that you see, the latest binographic, doesn't include the food waste rollout to the phase 2 to the flatted properties. That binographic will be included next year because we plan to do this on a more regular basis now. The composition analysis basically takes place once a year. That's what we're aiming to do it at now. And there was a break obviously during the pandemic, but we're aiming to do it once a year. And what we do is we have some independent people come in and do some samples from various bins around the borough. So we'll make sure that some, for example, are flatted properties, some are residential, some are HMOs, and also from different geographic areas as well of the borough, so that we get a representative guide to what's in our residents' bins. So we try and stay pretty consistent in where we take the samples from and what the residents that we take the samples. But what you're seeing there is a change from pre-food waste and smaller bin rollout to what it was after the food waste and the smaller bins have been in place for 12 months. So you will see change again when in the next year, but it just gives us some real insight, as Councillor Rowland said, is what we're really interested in is how much food waste is still left, how much wood is still in there, textiles, garden waste, and we can then target our resources on those activities to make sure that the recycling enforcement team and all our comms is aimed at the most appropriate place where we can make the most difference. So that's what the waste composition analysis is for. It's a guide and a tool really, but it's a real helpful tool to be able to make sure that we're using all our resources in the right place. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Cresswell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Andy. It looks like a very successful scheme and it's very welcome. My question is about collection from flats. Lots of flats have issues with collection of all waste, missed collections, and in Kates Grove we have a lot of problems with missed collections leading to dumpsters surrounded by bags, which then mean the next collection is missed and the whole thing steamrollers. Do you expect the food waste collections to be more robust to kind of vehicles being in the way and that kind of thing?
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell, for that question. So there's two things there, obviously. In terms of missed bin collections, I think what you're talking to there mainly is about the communal properties. So I think what you're referring to there is where there's parked vehicles or roadworks are taking place and where we can't collect on the day that's scheduled and what is planned. So what we always try and do there is we try and go back various times in the week to see that if the obstacle's been removed. We also, with our recycling enforcement team, look at if we can actually put stickers on the offending vehicle and say, you know, by parking like this, we haven't been able to do the collection on the day. So we do try and resolve the issue at source. What we also are looking at is other ways of collection, whether a narrow vehicle is something that could potentially be introduced at a later date to aid access down these streets. But the best way we can deal with that is by working with the residents, because if they're stopping our refuse vehicle going down there, they're also stopping ambulances, fire engines and other emergency vehicles gaining access down that road as well. So what we're proposing to do and what we are doing is areas where we've got collection issues, working more actively with the residents to say, come on, we need collectively to do something about this, because if we don't resolve it, as well as you having issues with waste on your street, potentially there could be a more serious risk of a, you know, for example, a fire engine or an ambulance not being able to gain access to that street. So I've got no odd, fast solutions for you now, Councillor Cresswell, but it's something that, you know, both as ward members, officers and residents, we need to work together to try and eliminate this issue as much as possible. But we are unfortunately restricted by the narrowness of the streets, now cars apart, which causes some of these problems we've got. So I've got no silver bullet there for you, but it's something we need to continue to work towards.
Thank you. And I have a question from Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report, Anthony. I don't have a question for actually. There's just a clarification on bin liners to Councillor O'Connell. I'm just reading something on a website which says if you run out, you can use anything from old shopping bags to bread, cereal, crisp or salad bags, a sheet of newspaper or buy bags on a roll. So there's, you know, you don't have to use the bags that are provided by the council. Just in case you didn't know.
No, and I did carry on recycling despite not being able to get any, and I used the folded newspaper technique, which I felt was completely biodegradable. It's just when the green bags you knew were biodegradable, you knew it was going to be compostable with the rest of it, and there's just something about using crisp packets that felt bad, you know, but newspapers worked.
Okay, right. What's going, Councillor Rowland?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on a couple of points. The green bin liners are not biodegradable. No, they are not. No, they are. I had the pleasure of going up to the slightly smelly. Yeah, that's one thing you get to do. Yeah, go up to the site where all of the food waste is processed, and the food is really squished out of those. Okay, it forms, I mean, I could give you a picture. It's not a picture I share with a lot of people, but of a very, very tall, really kind of grotesque, kind of green, kind of mushy thing stack. And then those all get reused and extruded and then, yes, so, yes, and they're used, yeah, they're also used as energy. So yes, but the other thing I wanted to bring up about green bin liners too, you'll see that Wokingham has dispensed with green bin liners for cost reasons. So far, we are holding tight. Those costs are increasing, but we are trying to make sure that residents are mindful to only take one, to not use them for dog poo bags, etc. to take care of them. And it's something that we will continue to be bullish on Because frankly, if you're not providing liners, you then provide another disincentive for many people to buy into the food waste programs. So yeah, so I wanted to mention that. And finally, the other point to Councillor Cresswell's point about access to flats, those food waste bins or the rubbish bins that collect the food waste are smaller. So you generally have a little more success there, but yeah, so.
Councillor McCann, does that cover the point? Because I saw you sort of. Okay, cool. No. Your mic's off.
On my road, the food waste is actually collected in a wheelie bin that they just tip all of the bins into. So it makes it very easily accessible. Any places that there are challenges, it should be easily able to be got around. So yeah, there shouldn't be any challenges. Thank you, Andy.
Councillor Ayub.
Thank you, Chair. It's not just a question, but a comment I just want to make. I would like to thank Andy and the rest of the team for the work they have done and the report they have provided, because when the rollout for the food recycling came about to the local household in Reading, as I represent the town centre ward, I've had a lot of high-rise flats, and they send me an email saying, you know, when we will be included in into this scheme, and it's finally here now. It's been rolled out, and I think it will come across quite well. And I think it is the right step towards the right direction for the in future as well. So it's just a huge thank you, yeah, and it will be most welcome in the town centre. Thank you.
Thank you. I think as the climate emergency becomes more apparent, everyone in Reading really does want to do their very best for the environment, and that includes not basically putting things in grey bins that could potentially linger for hundreds of years underground, because when you're in anaerobic conditions, they don't rot. So I think we should also thank the people of Reading for their efforts to increase the amount of food waste being used in a more practical way than just being dumped into their grey bins, and I'm sure they'll be keen to help us increase that recycling figure going forward. So thank you very much everyone for that one. Right, on to agenda item 5. Oh yes, we need to do the thingy bomb, and then what's it? Can we agree the recommended action on page 11? Thank you. Then on to agenda item 5. So this is the allotment self-management update. Mr. Edgewords again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on the progress the service has made on carrying out the range of improvements contained in the allotments action plan, which is appended to the report since the last update at the H&L meeting last year, and also on the engagement of our allotment tenants and site representatives in the uptake of self-management practices across our 20 sites. So we've got one of the representatives here today. Nick Pritchard Gordon, who is in the room tonight, in his part-time role as allotment officers, has admirably led the engagement and increased participation of the tenants on these sites. Has done a fantastic job there, and the participation continues to increase month by month. The report also provides information on the rate of engagement per site, with some sites notably engaging actively during the journey towards self-management. Some of those sites were quite pessimistic at the start, where some were really enthusiastic, and it's been a real change in the attitude towards most of the tenants towards self-management. This has led to a noticed reduction on these sites in service inquiries that we as council officers are receiving, as tenant representatives are dealing with some of these questions and inquiries and complaints at source. So that's been a real positive part of it. What has become apparent, though, is that the service itself needs to review how we engage and administer our allotment tenancies, and the report outlines the proposal to consult on and review on the following things. That's the tenancy agreements for tenants, the tenancy agreement. We want to make sure that they are fit for purpose for all tenants, because we believe they're quite outdated at the moment. We also want to carry out a review of the rents charged and how we currently apply discounts towards the allotments. And finally, a review site by site on how we deal with the waste generated, which presently varies considerably from each site, and how we can work with tenants to recycle and reuse most of the waste that's naturally generated on those sites. It's proposed that we will fully consult on these 3 areas to take into account our tenants and site representative views before we bring back to a future H&L committee a further proposal recommending changes in these 3 areas. And that's one thing that we are committed to, that we'll do a full consultation before we come back, because it's really important that we gather and gain our site representatives and tenants' views, because they're actually out there on the living what's actually happening on these allotment sites. So thank you, Chair. Myself and Nick Pritchard Gordon, who was present, welcome any questions that may arise.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank Andy Edwards for his introduction of this item, but also to highlight the incredible work that Nick Pritchard Gordon has invested heart, soul, and everything else to getting our allotments in shape for the future. The story on our allotments was not nearly as cheery several years ago. It is not something that we were able to prioritize, but with the secondment of Nick and his continued work, we've been able to put heart and soul into something that is very important to our community. Allotments are very important and people are very passionate about them. I want to thank every allotment holder, every service manager of the allotment sites that have written to us in the last couple of days, realizing that we're coming just after Christmas here, with a number of suggestions, a number of concerns and things like that, that this report has highlighted about the positives, about the wonderful things that have been happening, about the increase of actual sites that we have recreated, about any number of points and positives that we've been able to make happen with our allotments. But all of those points will be considered. All of those points will be considered in a formal consultation. And I would also like to thank very, very much the site volunteers. There is one out there. There you go. See, wonderful. And the allotment societies and all of the people that own allotments. I see another person over there. It's like allotment city back there tonight that really believe and love their allotments and are working with us to work through the issues in order to make the allotments a better place for each of the local for each of our local participants. So. The other thing is I just want to wrap up by saying that we committed 2 years ago or so to really listening to you all and to actually getting down and doing the work and turning the page on our allotments to make them more to provide the things that we wanted to provide for allotment holders. And we are on that journey. This allotment self-management update is a snapshot in time of where we are at. And we continue, we know that this journey will continue and we will see better allotments in the future. And I look forward to communicating with allotment holders and the service leaders of those allotments to develop the project in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to reiterate a lot of what Councillor Rowlands has said. I'd like to thank Nick Pritchard Gordon for all his hard work on this report and liaising with the plot holders to help them with transitioning to the self-management model. I'm especially pleased that the plot holders in the Oak Tree Road allotments in Kentwood have adopted a self-management model. We must also thank the allotment volunteers because without those, this system wouldn't work. And I think it just shows that, when people are given the opportunity to step up, they will. And that's about it. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. I've got Councillor Creswell.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. It's very promising, and I've had positive feedback from residents. I've asked about it. I have one question from one resident who reported that they were on a waiting list that got quite a lot longer in the last couple of years, and just looking at the figures, it's quite hard to unpick whether that's to do with the self-management or maybe allotments are just a lot more popular. So I wondered if you had any comment on that issue.
Then my colleague wants to speak on that.
Was that an invitation? Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. The pandemic had a massive impact on demand for allotments. People thought, yeah, I've got loads of time now, and they've taken allotments, and the list grew astonishingly. What we've found that of people who've taken allotments since in the last year or so, it's only about 30% that have got what it takes to work an allotment. So it's a kind of churn, and one of the first steps we do when we're doing the whole site approach is to go through the waiting list and contact everybody on the waiting list and find out whether they still want an allotment. And you know, with Caversham Court, when you're on a waiting list for 10, 12 years or so, a lot of people are no longer around, they've moved away or worse. But generally we managed to slice down the allotment waiting list per site by about 40%. It fluctuates. It all depends on when we do these sort of data cleansing exercises. But there is also a bit of a contradiction at play when people say, or I heard say, there are no vacant allotments. There are vacant allotments, but we're trying to bring those back into cultivatable use. So they are vacant, known vacant allotments, and secondly, there are untended allotments. And Dr. Norman behind me, as site rep at Goddard's, knows all about that. Okay.
Thank you. And in item 4.2.7, it says the rate of lettings has increased as well, as you work through the lists and see who's decided that it really is very hard work. I used to have an allotment and I can attest to that. I don't have it anymore. OK, then I have got next on my list, Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you ever so much. I presume when you say or worse with those Caversham Court allotment holders, you mean moving over the other side of the river. Yeah. So I thank you for the work you've done. I mean, it is clearly such a huge difference from what it was a few years back. I used to receive fairly frequent phone calls, either from people on waiting lists complaining that they never heard anything, or from allotment holders complaining about particularly abandoned plots and feeling that nothing was being done. And there was just this sort of, it felt very stuck, and that's not what I get off this report. This report seems like the communication, I mean, the fact that we've got, you know, site reps here, the communication really seems to have opened up, which is just absolutely brilliant. I have one little query, and I might have missed it, but I thought I'd done the papers quite thoroughly. What happens to those sites that choose or don't have people who engage with you over time? Will the status quo simply remain in place if you haven't got enthusiastic people who want to do this?
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell. The levels of self-management, I believe when this was first mooted, 2007 in earlier papers, it was all about introducing self-management. Here's the model, and this is what we'd expect people to work to. This is community development. You cannot foist a regime onto people who are not ready for it, and quite frankly, given how left behind many sites and tenants felt, to expect people to get on and manage something that we might not have managed so well ourselves would be absolutely crass. So what we're doing is we're trying to find the people who want to get involved to some extent, to whatever level they want to get to. It's all good news, and then I try and get those people to try something new. In terms, it says in the report, there's no current site, or no site that's currently expressing an appetite for fully devolved self-management, and that would be some way away. Whilst I've been using the Oxford City Council's model, that was an imposed model across their 36 sites. That is not the way that we're working here. It's community development from the bottom up.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the one plot only policy. It says there are many residents who got multiple plots and you wait for them to surrender and reallocate. Do we know, when you say many, what percentage of plot holders have multiple plots? And the second part of my question is, a lot of time when these plots get rented, they might not get used for a longer period of time. And they might, and I do know this from volunteers and others, that the plots rented, not used for a long time, they can be reallocated to people who are on the waiting list, who are really want to use the plot, which is the purpose of allotments. So if you can put some light on that, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Singh. So with the multi-plot holders, there will be some people. There is one person that holds about 700 square metres of allotment plots, and works it really, really well. But that's 3 plots. Now, a standard plot used to be approximately 250 square metres. Nowadays, we're working on 125 square metres, and some people will have a 125 square metre plot plus a 75 and plus a raised bed in a communal plot. But it looks like it's around about 12% of the overall tenant list have have 2 or more plots. Okay, untended plots. So there's known vacants that we know that have been vacated, and what you're raising is, somebody's taken on a plot and they're not working it. It is the bane of this job, and I would be cracking on with the allotment project objectives far quicker if it wasn't for dealing with that particular issue. We go through a process that on the sites that are really involved, they will carry out their plot inspections, get in touch with the tenants and say, are you struggling a little bit? It's a very sort of informal and enabling. Are you struggling a bit at the moment? And if they find the people, they can't get hold of the tenant, or if they find the tenant flips them the bird and tells them it's not up to you, it's the council's job, then they'll the site reps will refer through to me, and then I go through a process of nudge emails, informal. Then we go to notice to treat. It's not up to standard. You've got this amount of time to bring it up to standard to meet your tenancy agreement obligations, and then we'll get to notice to quit. At notice to quit, the tenant doesn't necessarily need to leave the plot. If they sit tight, and we do have this, if they sit tight, we would need to get a court order to remove them. So that's something that we really don't, I mean, it's just so time consuming, but yeah, as I say, it is the bane, but we are getting so much better at it. And by we, that is Becky Flynn in the office, myself, and the site reps who are just doing a mega job. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett-Ward.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back with a bit of a personal experience based on that. I also was briefly an allotment holder. I applied when I had 2 children. By the time I got the plot, I had 4 children. Turned out that was quite difficult. But what I did after giving it a go for a couple of years and being the shame of my allotments, I contacted the council and said, well, I need to give this back. We're just arguing about who has to go and do it now. What's the process for me returning a key? And I remember the lady I spoke to said, I don't actually know, because nobody does this. We usually have to chase people. And it's one of the things that I hope will come from site management and having other allotment holders being able to have those conversations is that, because I was shocked, I knew how long I'd waited. So everyone who has a plot knows how long you wait to get one. To have those informal conversations where people go, actually, yeah, I'm going to let somebody else have that. And I'm hopeful that self-management will encourage that and improve that turnover, because you feel more responsibility towards your fellow plot holders than you do to someone that you're just going to phone up at the council. But I did manage to return the key. They had to make a process up just for me, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Barnett-Ward. Is this an opportunity for anybody else to own up to being a former allotment holder? I was that, so I am an allotment holder, and yeah. So a cracking example of where the site reps and committees and associations or whatever, they are dealing with that. So I provide them with a stash of keys when they do the sign-ups, showing people around. They do the sign up of the paper, send it through to me, and they've got the keys to hand out. And then when somebody's giving up, they give the keys back to somebody on site, as opposed to schlepping down to Bennett Road or wherever. And that it makes such a difference. It's the sum of all these little parts that are making this more efficient. And before Andy Gillespie and Carolyn Jenkins left, they said, I don't think we've ever seen such a significant overhaul of the service.
Excellent. Well, with thanks to you. Oh, Councillor Mpufu-Coles.
I wasn't going to speak, but he has convinced me to speak about the allotments, especially looking at the fact that he has explained about the fact that some allotments, especially for the elderly who might go into hospital and not being able to look after their allotments, and then the council makes effort to engage with people and try and find out what is happening, something which is really welcoming, because it meets most of the things that we actually put on our strategy: well-being, aging well, and good health and community engagement. On those bases, then the top bottom, and he mentioned it's from bottom up. So those are things that are very, very important for the local people to hear such things are happening and engage on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really good item, and some great work's being done. It is important, I think, to get outside if you can, and having a contact with nature and the soil is very, very good for the body and the mind. So good luck to every allotment site and their self-management. Exciting times. Okay, then on to, oh, hang on. Oh, too excited about the next bit. Can we agree the recommended action on page 19? Yeah. Yes, okay, so just to remind everybody, from now on, the page numbers aren't going to match the online report, in case anyone gets confused who is watching us. So we're on to agenda item 6. So this is the domestic abuse and safe accommodation strategy 2023 to 2026. That's all right. It's good to see this, and I do work for a charity that does deal with domestic abuse, and we do know that the incidences of domestic abuse are on the increase, unfortunately, and quite significantly so. So this is a very important report to have come to Housing, Neighbourhoods and Leisure today. Jo Middlemiss, would you like to introduce?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. So this report introduces the domestic abuse and safe accommodation strategy for 2023 to 26. The strategy has been produced in collaboration with Reading's Domestic Abuse Partnership Board, following the completion of a comprehensive strategic needs assessment and a public consultation exercise. Following the introduction of the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, steps have been taken to reinvigorate the previous Domestic Abuse Steering Group to become a Domestic Abuse Partnership Board, and that we ensure the provisions are made to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment to understand the need for domestic abuse support within Reading for all of our victims who reside in relevant safe accommodation, and that a strategy is produced and published setting out the provision of such support. Reading's strategy encompasses this requirement as well as the wider issues that have been identified in the needs assessment. As a result of the needs assessment, 6 priorities were identified, and a public consultation was undertaken between July and September of last year to gather views about the proposed priorities. The strategy was written in collaboration with key partners following the completion of the consultation and approved by the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board in October 22. The Partnership Board is now in the process of finalising the 3-year plan, which focuses on a number of key areas, including the commissioning of refuge support provision and non-refuge support for anyone who is a victim of domestic abuse. But we also focus on supporting victims from diverse communities to access support and to ensure that those victims with no recourse to public funds are supported. The plan will be overseen by the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board, which will provide progress reports to the Community Safety Partnership, which is the overarching board for the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board. So to conclude, this report recommends that Housing, Neighbourhoods and Leisure Committee endorses and adopts the new domestic abuse and safe accommodation strategy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, and I would like to thank Jo Middlemiss for introducing this very important strategy. This evening, domestic abuse and our safe accommodation for victims of domestic abuse is something that is a statutory obligation, but also something that is deeply important to this council and to obviously also the Thames Valley Police, who are form amongst with other agents our domestic abuse partnership board. The points that I would like to highlight, as I'm sure that people have, I do hope that people have read the report that was placed on your desk this evening, that the story of domestic abuse is that this has got to be everyone's business. This is every counselor's business in this room. This is everyone's business in our communities and our outreach, because domestic abuse is something that is hidden. It's not often spoken of, and the diverse communities that we still need to be able to get out and work with in creating an awareness around domestic abuse, the acknowledgement that the LGBTQ community is very much a part of domestic abuse, and that we have also, along with women and children that are affected, we also have men that are victims of domestic abuse. And so we need to be thinking about all of those issues. We have refugees in this country, sometimes without means of public recourse, that also suffer from domestic abuse that we need to be aware of. And that's something that the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board is looking at those areas where we can delve down and try to really ensure that we are getting at the root of domestic abuse in domestic properties and where people live. The safe accommodation is extremely important, obviously, and something that we are continuing on in our new contract until next year. The safeguarding of victims is also something that is of primary importance, and working not only with the victim survivors, but also the perpetrators. So it is very serious business. It wraps it up in the domestic nature of everyone's personal lives. And so this looks to together as a partnership, working with the agents, working with Thames Valley Police to make sure that we are looking to address that in the future. So I would commend the adoption of the strategy as put out on your desk this evening to colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you. I have absolutely no hesitation in supporting this strategy. I looked through it in detail, and it is so thorough. It really is. You seem to really have a grasp on what needs to be done to move things forward, and the aims and the ambitions are really high, where they should be for our residents, particularly our vulnerable residents. Really ambitious. You'll possibly not be able to answer this question, or maybe it would be not politic to, but my concern is that every service that's involved in this strategy is facing reduced funding because it for no other reason than because of rising costs. And I wondered if this was impacting the ability to deliver this really brilliant and ambitious strategy. So yeah, I suppose that's my thing, the resources, and by that I mean the people you need as well, you know, people turning up to meetings and representing their agencies. Are they able to marry with this excellent ambition?
Thank you. So with the introduction of the Domestic Abuse Act of 21, the government allowed provision for new burdens funding for local areas. So we are fortunate that we have been allocated new burdens funding, including for the next financial year as well. There's no denying that the cost of living is impacting our refuge provision, the fact we're finding it very difficult to move people on from refuge provision, etc. But those are things that we're working with our current contracted provider to address, using some of that new burdens funding, as well as looking at how we can resource how we're going to deliver this strategy, particularly the safe accommodation element of the strategy moving forward. So we are in a fortunate position. And in terms of the contribution, well, the funding that's allocated for the contract that we have with the current provider, there's no change to that funding that we're using moving forward. So the bonus of the new burdens funding is actually helping to deal with some of the issues that we're currently facing.
Thank you. Councillor Lanzoni.
Thank you, Chair. I also welcome very much this strategy. I wanted to underline 2 points, which I'm particularly happy to see. I want to be clear, domestic abuse is first and foremost an issue of too often men being violent towards women. And I think we need to give all the attention to this problem and to make all the services focusing on women. Looking at the numbers, I read about every 3 victims in young age between 16 and 26, 2 are female, 1 male, 75% also locally in Reading of the perpetrators are male. At the same time, I really appreciate that an evidence has been highlighted about making the service more open also to male victims, victims of sometimes, most often other male, sometimes other female. While I want this service, I want every woman in Reading obviously to keep feeling that they can ask for help. I wouldn't want potentially male residents not feeling comfortable to ask for help. So I was really pleased to see that. The other comment I wanted to make, which made me particularly glad, is seeing a focus on schools and the work the partnership can do in schools. So not only to trying to solve the problem when the problem is already there, but also doing some work around the prevention, where I think as council, as Reading Borough Council, can actually be active, because most of the enforcement is actually not with us, but more with Thames Valley Police. So I was super glad to see attention in the approach of this topic inside school, the attention to discuss the issue of sexual violence inside school, giving our children the opportunity to talk about this painful but necessary topic, and the attention towards healthy relationship education inside schools. So really, really pleased that we are looking also at the root of the problems, not only at the dramatic consequences of this issue. Thank you.
That's a very good point. It's best to stop it happening in the first place rather than having to deal with the consequences. And I think that is, Councillor Rowland said, it's all of our responsibilities, and especially those of us who are parents. No longer are we going to tell people they hurt you because they like you when it comes to a little boy, little girl hitting the other one. That's not okay. Any more questions? No? Okay. Then can we agree the recommended action then on page 47? Thank you. Okay, then on to agenda item 7. We are now looking at the Community Safety and Serious Violence Strategy 2023 to 2026. Joe Middlemas.
There we go. And can I introduce Superintendent Steve Raffield, who will follow on from my initial introduction as well. So this report introduces Reading's Community Safety Partnership's new Community Safety and Serious Violence Strategy, which has been co-produced with key stakeholders following a comprehensive strategic assessment and consultation exercise. The strategy has been approved by the Community Safety Partnerships Executive Group, which is now in the process of finalising a 3-year plan, and which will be launched following this committee if adopts the strategy. A community safety survey will commence at the end of February of this year to provide a baseline to measure the impact of the strategy and action plan on public perception. Reading's Community Safety Partnership is required to produce a strategy for the reduction of crime and disorder following the completion of a strategic assessment to understand the levels and patterns of crime and disorder in the local area. Further to this, the introduction of the Police and Crime and Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022 has placed further requirements on partnerships in the form of a serious violence duty, which sets out that partnerships must formulate an evidence-based analysis of the problems associated with serious violence in their local area and produce and implement a strategy detailing how they will respond to these issues. At the time that the report was written, the date for the serious violence duty going live hadn't been revealed, but I can provide you with an update on that, and that the duty will go live from the 31st of January this year. Due to the timing of the ending of the previous community safety strategy and the forthcoming serious violence duty, this community safety partnership took the decision to conduct a joint needs assessment and produce a joint community safety and serious violence strategy. As a result of the needs assessment, 7 priorities were identified and a public consultation was undertaken between July and September of 2022. This was used to gather the views about the proposed priorities. The strategy was written following the completion of the consultation and approved by the Community Safety Partnerships Executive Group in November 22. The Community Safety Partnership is now in the process of developing the Community Safety and Serious Violence 3-year plan and the delivery mechanisms that will be utilised to deliver that plan. These are due to be approved by the Community Safety Executive Group in February. So to conclude, the report recommends that this committee adopts the new strategy and approves that a new community safety survey is undertaken at the end of March to provide the baseline for measuring the impact of the Community Safety Partnership strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Superintendent Rethel, would you like to come forward and turn your mic on?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. As Joe said, Steve Rafford, I'm the Reading Police Commander and also the chair of the Community Safety Partnership. I co-chair with Councillor Rowland. I guess there are a couple of points that I want to make, and then I'm happy to take any questions on this. Firstly, the kind of vision around this is to, we've gone out to public consultation, we've got the priorities that we've agreed. The next phase for me and for Councillor Rowland are to kind of look at, what are the delivery mechanisms we want to sit behind this strategy? How do we look at the performance around that? How do we hold people to account for what they're doing? It would be, in my mind, my vision, I guess, is that each of those delivery groups aligns to the priorities, which is kind of fairly obvious, I guess, but actually, we bring in a wider group of people into managing some of those priorities. So it might be, say, for example, that we have different agencies leading on those different delivery groups, and we're clear around exactly what we want to do. The other thing I think unanimously we agree is that, and I guess talking from a policing perspective, one of the things I think we're not particularly good at is communicating with the public. I think that might resonate with a few people around the room. We kind of acknowledge we've got to get better at that. We do a lot of work. There's a lot of good work that goes on in the community, especially from a policing perspective, that we perhaps don't feed back into the community. So having a group that focuses almost entirely on what is our communication strategy, what's the CSP all about, and how can we adopt that kind of you said, we did approach, which I think would be really important. So that, for me, is a very, very important delivery group that we'll be looking to set up. The other bit really is around the serious violence steering group. The bit that's probably very close to my heart still is around serious youth violence, something which I probably worry about the most as the police commander here. And the bit we've got to get right. The serious violence group, I think, offers a real opportunity to bring some key partners together to look at actually how do we take some of the recommendations of some of the reviews we've had and take it forward to actually make sure we identify some of those children who are not only risky but at risk, and develop some real plans with other agencies, look at some of the data, work with already education, health, to make sure we're taking this where it needs to go. So I think overall some quite exciting opportunities for the CSP and for the Serious Violence Steering Group.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland.
Thank you. And I would like to thank Joe Middlemass for introducing this and doing the meat of the bringing everything together. And I'd also like to thank very much you, Mr. Ratfield, for all of your efforts and all of your sincerity and all of your support and hard work, really hard work in bringing this community safety partnership strategy together to be something that we can really work together as a partnership. So I'd like to thank you very much to yourself and also to your team. There is no doubt that this joint community safety and serious violence strategy is being launched at a time of some increasing concern within our communities. The report highlights some of the concerns that the communities have expressed, and the last community safety survey indicated that just done this past autumn indicated that 49% of the respondents stated that they believe the levels of crime are at high or very high levels, which is over double what it was in 2017. Now that is a perception. The strategy also highlights some of the realities on page 8. It sets out some of the realities of where we are at. But the Community Safety Partnership looks to working with the police and also with the council to address some of those, those issues. I appreciate Steve's comments that the way this will work is as a partnership, the way this will work is as a strategy that will look to set out those agents, and where we are now putting meat on the bones in several meetings that we've been diligent. We've got another one tomorrow morning to sit down there and put down the meat on the bones of how those agents are going to come together to work together and how they're going to be responsible for delivering what the CSP needs to do. For those of you that are new counselors, I will also just give you a bit of context that the police crime commissioner since the 21-22 fiscal year has allocated a 52% year-on-year annual cut for the community safety partnership and the community safety program here in Reading. And so we are, that is a backdrop that is very, very important to understand. Only Slough was the only other authority within the TVP that met with such reductions. And we will not bemoan that, and we will not give up on that. And that means that this community safety partnership and serious violence strategy only has to work harder. It's got to be sharper, because we still have those goals that we need to meet to provide a safer community within Reading. So that's also very important to note. I have every reason to believe that working hard that this will begin to deliver, but it also does state in our covering report, and I believe that's in section 3.6, that it does acknowledge that this strategy is put forward at a time when public finances are considerably impacted and when there's resources challenges running across the partnership. Councillor O'Connell, as you mentioned, your concerns with the domestic abuse strategy, it is much more impacted here indeed, because we just simply have got to work that much smarter. So at any rate, I have every good belief that what we are putting together is the right thing. I believe the dedication is there, and I believe that the communication that we will be looking through the CSP and that Steve is committed to will start to happen and will start to allow residents to understand where the differences are being made. So I would commend this to colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to comment that I support the report and the recommendations within it. It's really important. And I think it's important that this committee acts as more as just a rubber stamp. And I know Councillor Rowland appreciates that sentiment, and we'll make sure that happens in this tracking back and looking at what baseline comes out further to the survey. I think it's clear that a lot of the priorities could be met by better neighbourhood policing, and I won't go on a political rant because that's not for tonight, but when the Police and Crime Commissioner comes to Policy Committee, I'm sure we'll give it to him. Because it's really important, you know, and I've been a councillor for 4 years, but I'm still surprised every time I go to a Safer Neighbourhood forum and there's no police because there's no one on shift or they've been called to someone else because there's not enough of them. You know, there's times where there's 3 of them in the neighbourhood team covering Coley and Catesgrove, and that's not acceptable. And I'm not at all blaming the superintendent, and, you know, I appreciate his candidate comments about communications, which is really important in terms of that reassurance, because Councillor Rowland touched on perceptions, but of course perceptions matter, and I know that's what the sentiment you struck, because whilst crime might go down or you can skew a figure this way or that, people in Reading don't feel safe, you know, and one of the priorities is safety for women, and we know that the council can play a significant part in terms of maybe lighting via SIL funding, but ultimately it's down to the police, and, you know, we all wish they had the proper resource, and we all know that in reality they don't. But I'll stop because I will go on a political rant. But just thanks for the work that is being done. And I hope to see neighbourhood policing back where it should be, because I think all of those priorities could be assisted by proper neighbourhood policing, and not in a small way, but in a very big way, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor O'Connell.
Well, I'm going to hear you as well. I can't disagree with anything you said. I used to work on a youth offending team, and that partnership working was so effective. It was very exciting when the youth offending teams were first set up, and I was lucky to be on Bracknell's as it formed. And I hate it when we're told we have to work smarter, because we're already pretty damn smart. And it's just a way of hiding the fact that they're talking about cutting stuff. So I won't go on a rant either, but yeah, when's he due? I want to thank you guys for all the work that's being done on this, and I concur with what Councillor Emberson said about the perceptions of crime are so important. It's not, you know, whether or not the streets, the houses on your street are being burgled, it's whether you're scared that the houses on your street are going to be burgled. That's just as important. I wanted to say that in the past, up in Tilehurst, I have really appreciated seeing officers, but also representatives of the police. So I'm not saying they necessarily have been officers themselves at local events. And I would love to see that sort of coming back, where you have the stalls and where you're able to spend, you know, sort of a day chatting to residents as they wander past. I think those kind of things are really important for building that trust and confidence from the community in police officers, and to see the police as the friendly resource that we know and want them to be, you know, rather than the perceptions because of bad news that you see, you know, in the media of the tiny minority who, you know, are not good in the job. If I've got a question, I suppose my question is, as you build trust, are you able to build relationships with ex-offenders or people who were engaged in sort of gang? Is that a strand for the future to try and bring that in to inform what we do, what you do? As I say, having come from a youth offending team, that idea of being able to, nobody understands the sort of criminal apart from as well as the criminal does, and, you know, are we able to do that at all? Is there any scope?
I think, I mean, that's a good point, Councillor. Thank you. I mean, I suppose the easiest way to context this is some of the work we're doing with schools around. I mean, we're working with a charity at the moment which is going to schools and talking about kind of involvement with knife crime. and to that extent, yes, we will do that. On a broader basis, I don't know. I think I like, you know, I get the comments that are made. I like the idea of community engagement. Stalls, yeah, yes. I think probably it's broader than that. I think there are, you know, I think we've got to be realistic about our resources. We've got to be realistic about the way we engage with the public. There are digital forums now, you know, we've got to probably just modernise the way we engage. And the reason I think that this delivery group is going to be so important is I'd look to that group to think about actually what, you know, broadly across crime, how does the CSP, how do the police engage with the public, you know, on a broader basis than that. And you're right, we've got to think about not just how the police engage, but how does the CSP engage with that? And it's probably not answering your question, but it's something I'll keep in mind as we start to develop it. I think it's a good point.
Joe?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on one of your points, Councillor O'Connell. So the probation services reducing reoffending strategy. So South Central have got their own strategy. It's a broad area. It's kind of Thames Valley and Hampshire as well, but there's a real commitment within that strategy around how ex-offenders work, kind of reintegrate within communities as well. So aligning ourselves with that strategy, and I've made reference to it in the strategy document, is really key. Also with young people, there's an alignment now with the Reading's Youth Justice Partnership Board with the Community Safety Partnership as well. I actually sit on that Youth Justice Board, so making sure that those real linkages now running through what we're doing within this 3-year strategy with all the other strategies as well. And the work the probation service actually does in terms of community payback, that's one of the first steps in some cases in terms of those ex-offenders working within those communities. And we're starting to think a lot more now about it not just necessarily being cleanups and that kind of thing, what else they might be able to do in terms of working within communities too. So that we're really starting to think that through. And just on your point about working with communities, so through our first round of Safe Streets funding, we developed the concept of Love Your Neighbourhood. Now that could be anything from a pop-up event to a clean-up. So actually starting to work with communities, it will be council officers, partners, police colleagues in various different formats, actually going into neighbourhoods, going back to what we used to do really well, and actually having this concept of Love Your Neighbourhood. So we're all part of that process as well. So just wanted to provide some updates there.
Thank you. Councillor Mpufu-Coles.
Oh, thank you very much for that report. I just wanted to start with some bit of positiveness because I think I've had positive engagement with the police recently, which is commendable when others are struggling. But I wanted to say that we've actually had some good engagement last year with the police officers and had a meeting, and also the officers in Weekly Ward specifically who are you can contact directly if there is something that is happening, and they've come to our local community center to talk to people, and they are seemingly engaging. I know there's less staff, but there is some work which needs to be done, and that is commendable. Thank you very much for that. And I wanted also to bring, there's something here which talks about neighborhoods, 5 of which are with the most deprived, 10%. And I'm in a ward that is one of the 5 of which is the most deprived. And just wanted to find out from the police officer, how does that link to crime and serious violence in areas that are mostly deprived? Because there's a lot of drugs in areas like Weekly, which are constantly reported by people when we knock on doors. And this, as you know, leads into petty thefts and serious violence as we go about. And just wanted to find out how you constantly monitor those, especially when residents report to you and see specifically which areas are mainly the ones that you concentrate on and try and help, because the young people there are the ones also engaged in this, and most of the local people are quite aware of these and they have got information that could help the police officers. The other thing I wanted to bring as a second question was about hate crime, which I saw a report recently, which has been done also including with ECA, that shows that there's a massive increase of hate crime, and also how and why that has become such a big issue in Reading, looking at how very much we are much diverse. I think 35% in the recent census, if I'm not wrong, shows that we're very diverse. And what is it, the causes of this high percentage of hate crimes that is happening in the time, which we really need to look at, because it makes people unsafe to be in their own town and walk around. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think a couple, in relation to your first question, I think a couple of things. So we adopt when it comes to drugs, harmful drugs lines, and you'll see in the strategy that we, our commitment is to tackling the drugs lines which cause the most harm to our communities. So in terms of identifying those, we have a fairly mature scoring process where we look at those lines which are involved in exploitation of children, those lines which are involved in violence, and we've got a team that are dedicated to dismantling those lines. So we tackle them on an evidence basis. The other thing to say is that you'll know is in Whitley and in places like Tilehurst, we've had incidents of serious violence involving knives, and our response to that is certainly within policing is to look at actually, what do we need to do about the particular line? Who do we know around? What does the intelligence tell us around who's involved? And how do we dismantle and tackle that group? But also linking it to the work we do on the ground in the community. So we'll send officers out into the community to gather some of that intelligence and work out how we actually tackle that. So it's kind of a multifaceted approach to that. And I think we've done that in Whitley and Tilehurst with some success recently over the last year, I'd say. We're doing some particular work around Tilehurst at the moment, looking at tackling the various tiers of organised crime. So some of my teams will tackle the more organised elements of it, and some of my teams will look to tackle some of the street-based dealing and gathering of community intelligence. And then as a partnership, we'll work at actually trying to hand aspects of that back into the community itself. So there's a kind of broad approach to it, if you like. In relation to hate crime is an interesting one. I'd be cautious around saying that increases in hate crime reporting is a bad thing. I think what you could say, the analogy you could make, is that actually, if people are coming forward and reporting hate crimes, that could be a positive thing. I think you'd have to break it down. So I would look in the context of perhaps national hate crime reporting and what the hate crime numbers are telling us about reporting in Thames Valley Police as a whole, and then what we see locally, and how we split that down into different categories. I've looked at the numbers, and I have to say I'm fairly confident that the increase in numbers would tell me that people are happier to come forward and report stuff. I think the challenge for us is actually, as a service, how do we give people confidence that we're effectively dealing with hate crime? And I went to the Hate Crime Forum recently. We talked a little bit about some of the difficulties around prosecuting hate crimes and some of the delays in the criminal justice system. I think that's probably the challenge for us. But I'd to a certain extent welcome increases in hate crime reporting, I think.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. I've been one of the longest standing councillors now on this committee, so coming up 13 years now. And I can say that your communication has improved, because it was something we're very keen on when I was a very new councillor, especially considering I represent Battle Ward. So there is a lot of information about who has offended and what the consequences of that offence are. So I commend you for that. That has got better, but obviously, you know, you can always do more. But I would like to make the point is that I became a councillor in 2010, and we just have to look at the national government that came in at that point and see what has happened and the consequences of cuts to budgets across all public services. And it can't carry on like this, can it? Everyone is suffering, and I think that's where we need to place the blame firmly. It's not with the police, it's not with the council, they're just dealing with the budgets that they've got. It's firmly with national government. They've had 12 years and they are failing. So can we please approve the recommended action then on page 89 on the paper copy of the agenda?
Approved.
Agreed. Right, then on to agenda item 8, and this is the Housing Ombudsman Revised Complaints Handling Code. Sarah Taplis.
Thank you, Chair. This information report outlines the requirements of the revised Complaints Handling Code published by the Housing Ombudsman. In March 2022, as part of the enactment of the Social Housing White Paper, the Housing Ombudsman published an updated Complaints Handling Code, which came into effect on the 1st of October 2022. A replacement Housing Ombudsman scheme was also implemented on the same day, and compliance with both is a mandatory requirement for all social landlords. A key requirement included is the annual completion and publication of a self-assessment against the revised code, which is published on the Council's website. The Council assessment indicates that we are compliant with the code in all areas, but there are 2 areas where there are exemptions allowed for local authorities as long as they are working in line with a wider corporate complaints procedure. It is now also expected that performance and activity data relating to the complaints is reported into a governing body annually and will therefore be included in the annual Housing Update and Works Programme report to this committee by the Assistant Director for Housing and Communities each March. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't have much to add. It's quite a straightforward report, I feel, but you know, I do believe that we are the best landlord in town and complaints are really important for our tenants. I think, you know, we always take them seriously, and this just kind of helps to reassure us that by looking at the self-assessment in terms of what we do. And whilst the white paper came out some time ago, in terms of the private sector, I think they're quite far behind in terms of what they do in terms of complaints. And I do feel we have a good service, and of course I see complaints, we all do as councillors in terms of our tenants, but I hope this is reassuring to the committee, and I'm glad that it will track back again, a bit like my comment earlier in terms of not just rubber stamping stuff. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor O'Connell.
Yeah, just a really quick one. Thank you for the report, and you know, it was very clear and comprehensive. The only thing that slightly confused me was the keeping of the stage 0 area of non-compliance, because if it's confusing, why, I just couldn't understand why we were keeping it if it made us non-compliant.
It's not that we're non-compliant. It's more that we have an exemption. So as a local authority, we have an exemption to have a stage 0 if our wider corporate complaints procedure. So because the Ombudsman scheme is set up for all social landlords, including all housing associations that will work individually, but for local authority landlords, that as long as we're working in line with our wider corporate complaints procedure, we can keep a stage 0, and it also impacts on the timescales that we have to reply to complaints within.
Sorry, is that the only benefit to us? Is it on timescales, or does it provide something for the complainee as well, the person making the complaint? Is there a benefit for them about us keeping it? Because it says it's confusing.
The exemption. So the position for the Ombudsman, from the housing Ombudsman's perspective, is that they believe that it can create some confusion. However, corporately, our position is that actually a stage 0 can lead to much swifter and responses to complaints. And often, you know, there's conversations where people say, I just needed somebody to pick up a phone and have a conversation with me. I didn't need a 10-page letter. That stage 0 still allows us to do that as a council. No problem.
Anybody else? No. In that case, then, can we agree the recommended action on page 123? Agreed. Thank you. Okay, on to agenda item 9, which is the High Street Heritage Action Zone Programme Update Report. Donna.
Thank you. This report provides an update on the High Street Heritage Action Zone, known as HAZ, over the last 2.5 years and the plans for the remaining 16 months of the programme. The programme started in April 2020 and has, despite the pandemic and its consequences, delivered some significant positive changes. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to the achievements set out in section 4, in particular the planned improvements to shop fronts and repairs to town centre monuments, the extensive community engagement that's taken place and the wide-ranging cultural programme, of which there are links to the videos, so you can have a look in the report. I'd also like to draw the committee's attention to note the delivery plan that's set out in section 5, which includes further improvements to the public realm, further events and activities to showcase the rich heritage of Reading's high streets. Thank you.
Councillor Barnett-Ward.
Thank you, Chair. If this had been a shorter agenda, or if we'd been a bit earlier in it, I might have indulged myself a bit and gone through some of the fantastic work that's happened under this project, but I'll be kind and I'll just hope that everybody has read it. It's got my name on it, but this is something that was very much launched and driven by Councillor Vaughan to my right. Also, Councillor Leng, lead councillor for planning, is very, very involved in this. You have hopefully spent some time and looked at all the successes, particularly the cultural programme, the community engagement's been fantastic. It's been amazing and really important to people, particularly through the pandemic and lockdowns, a situation that we hadn't anticipated when this started. I would like to draw everyone's attention to the risks, which is section 6, and on my digital copy here, that's page 148. It'll slightly differ if you've got a paper copy. This project was conceived, the whole High Street Heritage Action funding came forward pre-pandemic. The pandemic has, of course, impacted on our ability to actually get involved with business owners, property owners, landlords, get some of those physical changes that are a really important part of this project. And despite representations from ourselves, and I think every council that's doing this, the government will not extend the period in which we've got to spend this money. So there is a significant concern. It's something that Councillor Leng and I are very much focusing on. We want to deliver as many positive physical interactions is not the word. Improvements isn't quite the word. It begins with an I. No, yeah, something like that. Anyway, we really want to. We know the cultural programme is working really well and will have long-term benefit. We know the community engagement is working really well and have long-term benefit. Where we are really focusing now is to make sure we have some improved buildings, we have improved public realm, and it is needlessly challenging to do that, and it's extremely frustrating that DCMS are not pretending a pandemic didn't happen. But I'm really pleased with the work officers are doing. We've got some really good property owners engaged in the project now, and we will start to see those benefits. Do keep looking at these update reports, and we will certainly deliver as much as we can, but it is ridiculous that we're having a completely arbitrary constraint placed on our ability to get the money onto the streets.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland.
Yeah, I just wanted to add really quickly, obviously, as the town's heritage champion, I'm very keen on what the High Street Heritage Action Zone has been providing for this town over the past 2.5 years. And I would say that to those risks that Councillor Barnett-Ward and Councillor Leng are very seriously looking at addressing, I was really pleased to see scaffolding go up on an address on Castle Street today, which is all part of those works that were set out. And so that is something that I know officers are working very hard to deliver. Yeah, it was quite the little Twitter excitement today, but I actually walked by and saw it. So it's that will really be exciting, and that will really begin to make some physical changes that will allow Reading to understand and appreciate its heritage, and also to say, wow, gee, I can actually forward myself, I can become, our economy can be strengthened, our cultural lives can be strengthened by paying attention to and appreciating our past, which is right in front of us. So wonderful, and things are cracking.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I haven't seen anyone else indicate. Okay, no. I must praise credit to everyone that's been involved in this project. It really is fascinating. The mural is lovely, but it also had me prancing about in Kensington Park sambering. I'm hoping that's not one of the videos you refer to, Councillor Barnett-Ward. Might not be online. I could get it deleted. Okay, brilliant. Then can we approve the recommended then action on page 151? Thank you. Okay, then on to the final item. This is agenda item 10. Once again, cultural. So the Street Art Advisory Panel update.
Thank you. This is an update on the Street Art Advisory Panel and the next steps to seek approval for the process of identifying street art. The panel has met 3 times and has agreed a definition of street art and also devised a process for identifying street art versus graffiti. Subject to approval, the panel will start to implement the process which is set out in the appendix in the main report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett-Ward.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the trigger for this was the Banksy on the prison, when various people on social media went, "Oh, I hope the council doesn't clear it off." And we went, "Well, of course the council won't clear it off." Then we went, "What actual procedure is there to?" Because of course we won't. It's common sense. It's a Banksy. So that has sent us onto this project of how you don't evaluate what is art, but how you evaluate what is valued street art. And what's the process aims to do is to recognise that something that is felt to be an enhancement and enjoyed and beloved in East Reading or maybe North Reading might not be so welcome in West Reading or South Reading, that different communities have different approaches to street art and different things that they want to see. You'll see on the stages there is a general evaluation, content, context and consent, but something I'd really draw councillors' attention to is stage 3, which is where to ensure community representation, relevant ward councillors will be included in the advisory process. And we spent a lot of time looking at how practically, within the constraints of the council's abilities, we could make sure that residents had a voice. We felt from the start it was completely inappropriate to come up with a policy for street art for Reading Borough. We are many different communities, many different areas, and if street art is going to be valued, it is going to be valued by the people around it who see it every day. And if street art is going to be found to be inappropriate or offensive or problematic, it's the people who see it every day. So every councillor on this council should be in touch with their communities, should know their ward well, and when pieces of street art within your ward get referred into this process, will be on you to make sure that you know what your community want, that you communicate with your community, and that you represent your community's view into this panel. We've got fantastic local arts organisations who are getting involved. We've got specialists, heritage specialists. We're even checking that the street art isn't going to cause crashes on the IDR. We've got all that, but the councillors and the communities need to have a voice. And so it's really important that if you are approached about a piece of street art through this process, that you really give some time to that, so we can make sure that the decision that's made at the end is robust and is appropriate to your ward and your community. Thank you.
Councillor McCann.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, this actually does refer quite a lot to what Councillor Barnett-Ward was just saying. A while back I heard some talk about making the advisory panel a bit more diverse. I just wondered if anything had happened about that which could possibly help with that, reflecting the opinions of the community.
Yep, so the panel will, what we said with the panel is we've got an established membership, but we'll keep that membership under review as our stakeholders change, as our communities change, to reflect the diversity of our communities as well. This is we haven't been able to find another process like this, so this is very much one we'll have to be agile with, have to adapt. It is very likely to change as we can, as we work through, and I think that's something which is a good thing. And that's similarly with the membership of the panel as well.
Councillor Rowland?
Yeah, just quickly to that point, because I've been involved in that in the process of obviously all this, and my name is also on the front. It's a process that we've been working through for a while. To that committee can be very open, and some of the local artists were actually integral in setting out those kind of structures of which we are evaluating that with. So I would say that the people that do come to that committee are very representative of the art community, of the different, even the different sections of Reading, but I certainly would say that we're always open and would always be open to other recommendations too. But the process that was developed, and we did do a test recently, was very easy. It was very easy to work through. It did not sit down there and say, oh, is this art? Is it good? Is it bad? That was not what it was about. It was about the other different criteria, about whether it belongs with the community, is of the community, and all of the other structures that are laid out in the report too. So I want to say I think that the structure that has been set out for looking at street art is very good. Yeah.
I've got one more. Yeah. Councillor O'Connell.
Thank you ever so much. It's just a quick comment. I wanted to thank you for coming up with this. I think it's a really good idea, and I think it's too easy to dismiss the impact that making our environment more attractive can have on our sort of mental well-being and our feeling of sort of engagement with our own communities. And certainly the Banksy, I mean, I was so proud, you know, as I know that all of us were, that Banksy have bothered, and for such a good cause as well, you know, to try and keep the jail from being sort of turned into a massive hotel or whatever. Anyway, but in Tilehurst, I would love to thank, I don't know who does it, but whoever knits and puts them on top of the post boxes. It's just a joy to drive around and randomly spot one of these brightly coloured delights, and you cannot help but smile. So yes, thank you for coming up with this so that we don't ever accidentally have officers going around and removing the lovely knitted things or a Banksy off of a wall or whatever it is. So thank you very much. It's a great policy. Definitely support it.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett-Ward.
Thank you. Yeah, I love a yarn bomb. We sometimes get them in Christchurch Meadows as well. It's brilliant. I just wanted to emphasise something that Donna mentioned there, and thank you for reminding me about it. This is innovative. I'm a big fan. I'm always going, don't reinvent the wheel. Find out what other people have done. Nobody's done this. So we do have to be gentle and generous with it to make it work. And maybe the time to come, people will go, well, look at what Reading did, and see how well it's working there. But so we do have to understand this is a framework. We've trialled it. We are seeking permission to take it live now. But we may well be coming back and, oh, this didn't quite work and that didn't quite work, and that won't make the principle, the policy itself, a failure. It means there was no blueprint for this. And so everyone needs to approach it in a spirit of generosity and understanding what it is that we're trying to achieve, which is to celebrate street art that communities value and to ensure that we're removing inappropriate art or graffiti that make people feel miserable about where they live, and understanding the difference between those two. Thank you.
Thank you. I've not seen anyone else indicate. So then if we can approve the recommended action on page 163. Okay, right, that's a wrap then, folks. I'll let you back to your warm houses because it's a bit chilly in here today. And thank you very much for a well-structured and well-disciplined meeting today.
Thank you.